Hello everyone, Drum Tech drummer and online educator Kenny Sharretts coming to you with a product review and demo video for the brand new Black Hole Triggers from RTOM. These awesome triggers help you easily convert your Black Hole practice kit into a fully triggered kit for practice, drum cover vids, or a low volume rehearsal or performance kit when using the output of your drum brain. In addition, I'll be showing you how to program these triggers for 3 drum brains, the Yamaha EAD10, the Roland SPD-SX, and the Alesis Strike Pad. That way you get a general idea of how to program these triggers for these popular units. In addition, you will learn some trigger programming basics that will also help you with your overall drum triggering programming game. First off, let's talk about these very cool Black Hole triggers from RTOM. Sold in packs of 5 to cover a basic 5-piece kit, these Black Hole triggers have a sleek and efficient design that keeps them out of the way of your drumming. They also have the perfect mounting notch that locks them right to your black hole so they stay firmly in place for a smooth and consistent trigger response. This is especially helpful for attaching the trigger to the new Black Hole V2 bass drum models. The new design seats inside your bass drum hoop for a more natural feel, but leaves a spot for these triggers to be attached and for easy installation and removal of the black hole. Now, while I have used other triggers with these Black Hole pads, some were not very easy or practical to mount. The ease and reliability of the Black Hole triggers mounting clip and overall design make these triggers a no-brainer for those wanting to add triggers to their Black Hole kit. Installation with these triggers is super simple. Simply clip it to the black hole, plug in a 1/4-inch cable, connect that cable to your trigger input, and boom, you're ready to start programming your Black Hole trigger kit. I did want to point out one of my fave design elements of this trigger, which is the foam rubber pad that touches the trigger to the head. RTOM went with a firmer, more durable foam that keeps the trigger firmly in contact with the head, yet provides the perfect amount of clamps on the trigger's reaction to your drumming. This allows you to add a bit of juice to the trigger's playability and responsiveness via a touch more sensitivity in your programming. And because of their programmability and playability, I gotta say with a smile that these Black Hole triggers from RTOM are very adaptable to any drummer's style. And as a tech, I absolutely love this about these triggers. Now, as far as playability goes, these triggers have handled pretty much everything I've thrown at them drumming-wise. From straight-ahead backbeat drumming, to jazzier and funkier patterns. To heavy double bass patterns. One thing I have been loving about these triggers is that if I did find a triggering issue such as sluggishness or double triggering, in general, I was easily able to program the issue out. Now, do note that if you're a super hard player who then wants to be super quiet with the same settings, or a super soft player who occasionally wants to wail with the same settings, there will be small sacrifices you have to make in either direction of sensitivity to get that middle ground trigger performance like I'm set up for. But that can be the case with pretty much any trigger. So as far as the review goes, I gotta give these triggers a solid thumbs up for those who want to take their black hole practice pad kit to the next level. And for those who want a low volume triggerable black hole mesh head kit for rehearsals or low volume gigging, I can honestly say that these RTOM Black Hole Triggers are the way to go, y'all. Now, while choosing the sound you want a trigger to play is an important part of trigger programming, each manual for these units have clear instructions on how to do that. What is not always so clear is how the trigger programming parameters that are in the units work together to get the best, most natural trigger response possible. So up next in this video, we're going to focus on the parameters that control trigger response. So let's get into the finer points of trigger programming and how to use parameters to help you program for your new RTOM Black Hole Triggers, y'all. A quick side note, each of these drum brains has their own set of parameters for interpreting and shaping a trigger signal to match your playing style. Some of these parameters are named the same between the units, and some have different names. For the sake of efficiency, we will start with the settings for the Yamaha EAD10, and I will add in the finer points for the other units as we go. All right, the first parameter up for discussion is trigger type, y'all. This parameter allows you to match the brand and model of a trigger with pre-programmed settings in the unit that will work well for the trigger. For the black hole triggers on the EAD10, I recommend starting with the DT50S setting. Now next up is trigger input mode. These RTOM Black Hole Triggers are single zone triggers, so you will want to set your trigger inputs to separate 1-2 and separate 3-4. This is generally done using a 2 female to male Y splitter and allows one input to give you 2 different trigger sounds. For example, you could use this setting to use one input for your tom and your floor tom sounds. There is a similar parameter to make this choice in both the Roland and Alesis units. Please check your user's manual for details. All right, next we come to the velocity curves. Now, a velocity curve is nothing more than a pre-programmed setting for how your trigger interprets the velocity of your drum strokes. In other words, how does the unit react to how hard or soft you hit the trigger? For example, a normal curve follows a linear curve from soft to hard, i.e., if you hit it soft, it reads soft. If you hit it hard, it reads hard. With a loud curve, every stroke is enhanced by a curve that automatically increases the velocity and hence reactive volume of each stroke without the drummer having to play any harder. An example of how to use the loud curve would be to use it to minimize the volume differences of strokes that have slightly different velocities, so you kind of tighten it all up a little bit. Now, as far as these curves go, there are a lot of them in this EAD10 unit, and all well worth exploring. But for general drumming with basic triggers, you will usually stay within the normal, loud, and hard curves depending on your style. The Roland and Alesis units have a similar set of curves that will help you start your programming journey. Again, please check your user manual for details. Now we come to gain. Gain is a parameter that simply controls how hard the trigger signal hits the input. Trigger signals with low gain, samples might not trigger well, or they will have a very broad interpretation of what the response to the trigger signal is. Adding gain helps smooth out trigger responsiveness and smooth out differences in volume due to small differences in velocity and stroke. But don't add too much unless you want no volume differences in your strokes. This sensitivity parameter sets how the unit interprets the signal from the trigger in terms of sensitivity from when the pad is struck lightly. This is the playability setting of the triggering system. Too low, no trigger action. Too high, way too much trigger action. Because these triggers are sensitive, a setting of 1 on the EAD will still produce sound. And now we get into the parameters that help you tune the response of these RTOM black hole triggers and help you fine-tune your sensitivity in terms of playability versus double triggering. The reject time parameter basically sets the time for how long the unit rejects any signals coming through after the first signal is registered. This is a great tool for tightening up double triggers without having to reduce your sensitivity. On the rolling unit, they call this retrig cancel. Now the wait time parameter is kind of the exact opposite of reject time. This setting sets the time the unit waits before accepting a signal after the first one has been registered. Now mind you, when I say first one registers, sometimes a trigger gives a little peak just when you barely touch it, and you don't necessarily want that to be what the unit reads as your trigger stroke, especially if you're like cha-cow and hitting hard. You want the unit to register the harder stroke, and this is where this feature comes into play. Basically, this setting sets how long into the trigger's initial signal that the unit starts to respond. This tool is also great for cutting down on errant triggers or getting a less than full trigger signal to be considered for its velocity for volume characteristics. On the rolling unit, this parameter is called mask time. Next up, we have min and max levels. These parameters really help you refine your programming to fit your drumming style. The minimum level parameter is used to set the gates, if you will, for what the minimum level of stroke is needed to make the drum unit recognize a signal from the trigger. In other words, the softest hit that will make a sound. Anything softer than that hit simply will not make a sound. In addition, the min and max level parameters set the minimum and maximum velocity volumes this trigger will produce based on what the min and max velocity settings are. In other words, the softest hits allowed through will sound at the softest volume of velocity. The max volume level hits that are let through will sound at the max velocity of volume. Now this is a great tool for smoothing out trigger volume changes due to minor variations in how hard you hit. Now having a min-max level spread that is too wide can cause sounds to jump up and down in volume, can cause double triggering, and can also cause a jittery response from the trigger. In addition, lowering the max level can help make the top range of hard strokes sound much more equal. That way, if you're hitting really hard and then super hard, they still pretty close so they don't jump out in volume as you wail on the drum. And that brings us to the minimum velocity and maximum velocity settings. In relation to the min-max level parameter, the minimum velocity, maximum velocity parameter sets the range of volume that this sample trigger plays, i.e., this is as quiet as it gets, and this is as loud as it gets. And finally, we come to the crosstalk function. Now these parameters are the functions that help keep the pads and triggers next to each other from triggering falsely when playing another trigger. Fine-tuning the crosstalk between the individual triggers can be a very personal process based on your style, the room, the amount your kit shakes, and surprisingly how close your cymbals are to the triggers. I will say, however, that starting with your all reject levels as low as possible without false triggers is a great place to start to allow for two things. Number one, it gives you the broadest range of control of false triggering with the individual reject levels, and that kind of keeps it really smooth. Because number two, if you have the all reject levels a little too high, it can make the triggers feel sluggish or kind of like they're delayed or lagging when you play them. And you don't want that, because a lot of times you go, oh, that's the sensitivity, and you go adjust that. Or the reject level from the individual levels, or the retrig cancel, and you spent all that time messing with those when really all it was your all reject levels were just a little too high. So take the time to work between those two to really fine tune your trigger's performance. So I hope you've enjoyed this product review, demonstration, and trigger programming instructional video. For those of you who just want to learn a little bit more about drum triggering, I hope you've expanded your knowledge base greatly and helped yourself become a better trigger programmer. And for those of you who bought the RTOM Black Hole Triggers and you're using this video to program your kit, I hope you get all the triggering perfection you can out of this video, because I'm a drum tech and that's what I want for you, a great drumming experience. And as always, y'all, thank you for watching.